Theory lesson today. We're working through the Royal Conservatoire of Music Celebrate Theory, and we're working through the level 2. Today's lesson is on page 24, and it's from the unit 3. Today we're going to be learning about note and rest values, working with dotted notes, and writing music notation equations. Because in this section, you're going to be needing to find equal values of the notes that they give you, of the rhythms that they give you. So to start with, I just want to go over to one of my charts here. We went through this in a previous lesson from the last book, but let's have a look again at our pyramid of note values. So in this grade level, we're working with whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, and we need to know the note values for each of those. So your whole note is going to be worth 4 counts. Then underneath that, we see some half notes, and each of these half notes is worth 2 counts. Underneath that in our pyramid are quarter notes, and each quarter note is worth 1 count. Beneath that comes our eighth notes, which have 1 flag on the stem. And each of these, I'm just going to put in this corner here, they are worth half a count. And lastly are 16th notes, and they have 2 flags on the end of their stem. They are worth 1/4 of a count. Now, in this chart, I love the way it's laid out because it shows you that the equivalent of a whole note, you need 2 half notes. That equals the same as a whole note. To get 1 half note, you would need 2 quarter notes. But you need 4 quarter notes to equal the same amount as your whole note. And looking underneath that, we're going to need 4 eighth notes to equal 2 half notes. Or you can divide it smaller and see that you need 2 eighth notes, which would equal 1 quarter note. But you're going to need the whole row of 8 eighth notes in order to equal 1 whole note. And lastly, your 16th notes, you would need to have 8 of them to there in order to equal the 4 eighth notes, or 8 of them equals 2 quarter notes, or it would equal 1 of your half notes. But you're going to need the entire row to equal your 1 whole note. So this chart is really valuable. They have it showing on page 24 in your book. And you're going to need to reference that most likely as you're working through the next few pages finding the equivalent notation. Just going to stop the share on that one. Before we go farther, I need to go through dotted notes with you. So I'm going to share crescendo just to give you some examples, because we first need to know how to write a dotted note and where do we put the dot on the staff. So if you're writing a note, I'm just going to pick the quarter note here. If you're writing a note on a space and it's going to be a dotted note, that dot is going to go right beside the note in the same space as the note. If you're writing a dotted note and you're on a line, you're going to put that dot in the space just above your line note. Now, it doesn't matter if the stems are going up or down. Like, let's do a down stem up higher and on a line and turn that into a dotted note. The dot still goes on the space above where you've written that dotted note. And then including anywhere on spaces where you write a dotted note, it still goes on the exact same space, whether your stem is going up or the stem is going down. I'm going to change the share page because we need to figure out what kind of note value that dot is going to have when you use it on a note. So let's go over to my whiteboard so we can do some samples there. And it just takes a second to share. Here we go. Okay, so that dotted note. Now, if I was drawing, let's say, a dotted quarter note. Now, a quarter note is normally 1 beat. Dots always represent half the value of the note you see. So we're going to take that 1 beat and we're going to add half a beat. So a dotted quarter is worth 1.5 counts. What if I had a dotted half note? Now half notes are worth 2 beats. So we have 1 beat plus 1 beat plus. Now we just learned that that dot takes half the value of the note. So half notes, half of a half note is worth a quarter, and that's 1 beat. So here that dot represents 1 beat. So a dotted half note represents 3 beats. Just going to make some space here. Let's try another one. If I had an eighth and I put a dot on it. Now an eighth note is worth half a beat plus, now that dot is worth half of an eighth note. So that dot actually represents the 16th note. And the 16th note is worth a quarter of a beat if you go back to our pyramid chart. So here we have a half beat plus a quarter beat. So when you're writing what a note is worth, you're going to have to write a note equivalent to these. So let's look at that now. I'm just going to go to some equations here. You might see them give you a dotted half note, and they're going to say, write 2 notes that are equivalent to that many beats. So I could draw a half note, and I know that dot is worth half of that. So I'm also going to draw a quarter note beside it. They might give you a dotted quarter, and they're going to say, write 2 notes that are the equivalent of this dotted quarter. So then I would proceed to draw a quarter note, and I would add, that dot is worth half of a quarter. So I would add an eighth note. So there's my 2 notes that I've written out to complete this equation of equivalency. Just going to clear this board. The other thing that you're going to be working with is ties. Now, even though when you see a tie in music, so let's just draw a couple of quarter notes here, and I'm going to draw a tie between them. Even though you don't play the second note, you just hold it, it's still going to have beats. So 1 quarter plus another quarter, you still have 2 counts worth, even though the note is tied. If I change this and I did a half note and I tied it over to a quarter note, and they want to know how many beats this is worth, I'm still going to count this quarter note even though it's tied, because the beats in music are still continuing even though I'm holding. So a half note is worth 2 counts, and a quarter note is worth 1 count. So I have a total of 3 counts, even with the tied note. And just clear this board. I am writing with my mouse, so I'm not getting a perfectly shaped note. So here's a sample of a question that you're going to have to fill in an equation for. Let's say they give you an eighth note, and they're going to say that plus another note is going to equal a dotted quarter note. And you need to fill in the blanks on what would be missing in order to equal and balance this equation of a dotted quarter note. So we know that in a quarter note, we're going to see 2 eighth notes. So I'm just going to draw my little pyramid here, and there's 2 eighth notes. And we know that that dot is worth half of the quarter note value. So that dot is also worth an eighth note. So when I'm writing this equation out, I've already been given an eighth note, and I'm looking, so I've got this one, I'm looking for 2 more. So I would actually draw in another eighth note plus another eighth note. So now my equation is balanced. I have 3 eighth notes are the equivalent to 1 dotted quarter note. So that was one sample that they're showing you on page 26. Let's clear the board and try another example here. Here's one. They gave us a quarter note plus an eighth note plus, and they leave a blank for you to fill in something. This is equivalent to, and they want it to equal, and instead of giving you 1 note, they're giving you more of an equation, quarter plus quarter. Okay, so we know that quarter note is worth 1 beat. So we have 1 beat there. We're looking for another beat. This eighth note is half a beat. So we've got 1 plus a half, but we need it to equal 2 full beats. So I'm going to add another eighth note, which is worth a half beat. And my equation is now balanced. I have 2 beats on this side and 2 beats on the opposite side. So those are some samples that you're going to have to write, some equations we call them. They're also going to give you a time signature. Like let's say they gave you, you know what, I want to make this pen a little bit bigger so it shows up nice and clear. Let's say they gave you a time signature of 2/4 time, and they started you off with 1 bar. They would like you to notate just using rhythm. So we're not actually on a staff, and there's a double bar line at the end. They're going to ask you to write 2 beats in every bar, and you can notate it any way you want. So you're just going to look for notes that you know their value are worth 2 counts. The top number of a time signature indicates how many beats or counts we want in each bar. This is a bar going up to the next bar line. So within each of those measures, you need 2 counts. The bottom number indicates what kind of note gets the count. So we're looking for quarter notes. So here we know that that quarter is worth 1 count. Plus we have the dot is worth half and the eighth is worth half. So with those 2, we have another count. So there's our 2 counts. The note I drew next, a half note, there are 2 quarter notes in a half note. So I've got my 2 counts right there. And for a final bar, I could literally just write in 2 quarter notes. If I want to use eighth notes again, I could draw in 2 eighth notes and bar them like such. And again, excuse the messy notes. I have to try to adjust with my mouse. So there's a quarter note getting 1 count. 2 eighth notes equal 1 count. So I've got my 2 counts in this bar. So that's the other thing that you're going to be doing with this unit 3 in the level 2 theory book. You're going to need to really study that chart and rely on it as you're looking for equivalency. So that's your pyramid chart. And you're going to be writing music notation in equation form and trying to balance those with the same amount of beats after the equal sign. You're going to remember that your tied notes still count as beats, even though you're just holding it in music. It indicates how long, how many beats you're going to hold the note for. And then you're going to be completing your bars of music with a given time signature, looking for the top number of how many beats per bar and the bottom number indicating what kind of note is going to get that beat. And please remember, when you're working with dotted notes, the dot is worth half the value of the note it's beside. And it goes, if it's on a space, it goes on the same space spot. If it's on a line note, it goes on the space above. I hope this helped you with your unit 3. And if you have any questions, please let me know. And please subscribe because the next video is going to be about time signatures. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.